So, since the previous video based on a little community poll did pretty well, I decided I would regularly ask you a few questions, just to identify trends and themes in the Linux community and to help me refocus on what really matters, what I should talk about, and what is already addressed. Though this time the focus was on the problems you're still facing on your Linux desktop. I ran this poll for an entire week, I shared it on Mastodon and the YouTube community page, and I got 3,368 answers, which should be enough to look at a few trends. And as always, there is some inherent bias due to the fact that people who answered are part of my community, which obviously skews the result. It's also a small fraction of the Linux desktop users, so don't believe everything here, don't take it as absolute truth. Just like you should not take anything you read as absolute truth on the internet, and thankfully our sponsor can help with that. This video is sponsored by Ground News. You might have noticed it's getting increasingly hard to get access to solid news sources, or at least to know if there's a specific agenda or bias linked to a specific news source, and some publications even have financial ties to certain groups. To sift through all that, there's Ground News. Ground News doesn't write their own news articles, they aggregate them from more than 50,000 local, national, and international publications. Each source gets a bias rating calculated using 3 independent organizations, and they won't push stories based on your behavior, but on the amount of coverage each story gets. They even have a feature called Blind Spot, which gives you a list of stories that aren't being reported upon by either side of the political spectrum. The end result is that you get all the information available, which lets you make your informed decisions on every topic, and it lets you escape your echo chambers. For example, we have this story on OpenAI and their latest voice demo being way too close to Scarlett Johansson's voice in the movie Her. It has 162 news sources covering it, with only 21 sources leaning right on the US political spectrum and 41 sources covering the story leaning left. You can get started with Ground News for as little as 11 euros per year, and if you want to dive deeper into the ownership of each publication and personalize your feeds more, they have plans with more features to get the full picture. So click the link in the description or scan the QR code appearing on screen right now to get 40% off full unlimited access this month. So let's begin with the general skill level of the people who answered this little survey. And apparently the vast majority of people who answered are not beginners with Linux. 39% said they knew their way around Linux, and 10% said that Linux had no secrets for them. The middle of the road answer, being I understand how things work but I'm no expert, gathered 40% of answers, and only 10% of answers in total described themselves as what I would call beginners, with 9% saying they had a lot to learn and 1% saying it was a brand new world. Now these results will, of course, inform the rest of the survey and the answers. In certain cases, I will also try to give you the answers for the beginners group and for the average of all answers, because sometimes there are interesting differences, but do note that if you're a beginner, some of your problems might be underrepresented in this survey. So, what is difficult to accomplish on Linux? What seems to be the most annoying thing to deal with is integrating Linux systems with other devices. Stuff like syncing with your phone or sharing data between devices. 36% of people who answered picked this as a pain point. And I must say I have mixed feelings on this one, because we have online accounts implementations to mount various storage spaces on your Linux desktop. We have third-party clients to sync a lot of stuff with Google Drive, OneDrive, and others, and we have KDE Connect to send files or share the clipboard and notifications between a PC and a smartphone, no matter if it's Android or iOS. You also have apps like Warpinator to transfer files between computers. I never really saw this as a problem. So either the issue is that most people who answered use iPhones and iCloud, which obviously is not well supported at all for Linux, or maybe I'm just lucky because I use Nextcloud and everything is super seamless, or maybe all of these apps I just talked about are super obscure and no one ever heard of them, but I definitely did not see this as an issue. A second major pain point seems to be using existing hardware. 28% of people picked this as a problem, and we will explore that into more detail in a minute in this video. In the same vein, finding compatible hardware was a problem for 24% of people who answered. As per the usability of our systems though, it doesn't seem to be a real issue. Only 16% of people who answered said that they faced issues trying to get things done on Linux. And it can either be a positive thing, like, oh, only 16% of people just cannot do everything on Linux, or it can be pretty negative, as in, oh, out of all these people who definitely are interested in and probably use Linux, 16% of them can't get everything done. Interestingly, installing Linux was not picked as a pain point. Only 4% of people said it was a problem. But that's not super surprising, since we established that most people who answered weren't complete beginners. Among the beginners, only 7.2% said they encountered problems with installing Linux as well. So it feels like this step is no longer a problem, really. Now, interestingly, beginners found installing software and apps more difficult than experts. 20% of them said it was a problem, when the average for the survey is 10%. Okay, so since we identified that hardware is a problem on Linux, let's get into more details. Most people who answered have experienced hardware problems on Linux. This is undeniable. 44% said that they had a problem they could fix, and 36% said they had an issue they couldn't solve. Only 3% said hardware issues made using Linux difficult or impossible though, and 17% said that they had no hardware problem at all. Now, beginners seem more affected here, with 41% of them saying that they faced an issue they couldn't solve, compared to 36% of all answers. 34% said that they faced a problem that they could fix, compared to 44% on average, and 19% of them also said that they faced no problem at all, compared to 17% for all answers. So one might think that beginners probably are starting to use Linux on newer hardware that is better supported, but if they do encounter a problem, they are less likely to find a way to solve it. In terms of the main problematic components, there were a few surprises here. First are GPUs. 34% of people said they had trouble with their GPU, which absolutely deserves a deeper dive at some point, because GPUs on Linux are pretty much solved. Intel GPUs work flawlessly, AMD GPUs work out of the box, nothing to install, and Nvidia GPUs work really well on X11 with the proprietary drivers, and they work fine on Wayland these days as well. Also a surprise, gaming controllers and peripherals. 9% of people who answered said they had troubles here, where I never really personally had any issue connecting any controller to any Linux distro. And yes, VR headsets were a separate option, they are not included here. 6% of people answering said that VR headsets are problematic. Other things did not really surprise me, like fingerprint readers with 21% of answers. There are no drivers for these things on Linux, they just don't work. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth at 17% each are sort of surprising to me though. I thought this was a thing of the past, but apparently not. So yeah, pretty baffled by these results. GPUs, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth still considered as issues on Linux today. I didn't really see that coming because I have not had personally any problem with any of those components for at least 5 years. So not sure what these people are using, but apparently I'm the lucky one and people are having trouble with those. Now, as per software related problems, here again, Linux has issues. 48% of people who answered said that they faced a software problem that they could fix at some point, and 35% said they faced a problem they could not solve. Only 14% said that they didn't face any software-related problems. For beginners, the proportion is inverted. 36% of them said they had a software problem that they could fix, but 46% of them said they had a problem they could not solve. And 7% of beginners said software issues made their experience difficult. So clearly, software is still also a problem on Linux. If you're wondering what I'm including here, it can be an app missing to do what you're doing, a missing feature in the available apps, difficulty installing software, or bugs, or crashes, or anything along those lines. Basically, if you have software you cannot find that doesn't work the way you want, and you have no alternatives or it crashes, it goes into a software problem. That was explained in the survey, by the way. As per the problematic software categories, the biggest offender is apparently sleep, wake, and suspend functionality. 30% of answers pointed to that as a problem. App compatibility is also a big issue. No surprise here, 29% of people said Linux was not a supported platform for the software they needed to use. Gaming is a sore spot, with 27% of people answering that they are facing problems here. What really surprised me here was application bugs, crashes, and missing features. 27% of people listed application bugs as a big enough issue that they had to select it, and 25% picked application crashes. 15% said they were missing features in core apps, and 18% said they faced regular desktop environment or tiling window manager bugs. And this is a complete surprise to me. I was absolutely expecting people saying that we miss certain app categories, that some apps are not available, that some features are missing from the apps we have, but crashes and bugs in the applications and the desktop environments, this is news to me. Everything I've been using for, the past 5 or 6 years since I started this channel has been rock solid and super stable, so not sure what's happening here, but apparently, again, I am the lucky one here. Now, I'm going to call this chapter in the video productivity, but it's more being able to do anything you want, whether it's work-related or not. So it's just like getting stuff done, basically. Should have used that as the title. So 37% of people who answered said they could do most of what they wanted on Linux, but not everything. 33% said they could do everything, but some things were harder than on other platforms. 26% said they could do everything they wanted on Linux, and it's easy enough. And only 4% in total said that many or most things they needed to do were not possible on Linux. Beginners have a harder time here as well, with 43% of them saying they can't do everything, only 15% of them saying they can do everything they want, and 9% saying Linux is too difficult or not suitable for what they want to do. To address this, it is likely that beginners will face issues and they will have a harder time fixing those issues, whether it's finding the right app to download or fixing the bug that you're encountering or just fixing hardware support on a specific device, meaning that they will have a worse experience in general and feel they cannot do as much as they want to do. The end result is still that that's a lot of people who cannot do everything they want on Linux, even among experts, and that's not the opinion I had before making this survey or this video. As per the most difficult use cases for Linux, gaming is the number one, with 36% of answers. Office suites are also apparently a major problem. 20% of people felt they didn't do what they needed. Graphic design and video production, CAD, are also cited as big issues, all above 10% of answers. Now, at least the basics don't seem to cause issues with web browsing, writing, email, note-taking, file management, and the like, receiving very little votes in terms of how problematic they are. Again, sort of surprised here. I guess people who said gaming was a problem must be playing the latest AAA multiplayer title with anti-cheat, because single-player gaming on Linux just works. Like every game, just click install, run it, it works, there's no issues. And Office suites, I'm not sure. Personally, everything in there works for me. You go to the tabbed interface in LibreOffice and you actually have a better experience than in Microsoft Office. But of course, if you need macros and the absolute perfect compatibility, you should probably use OnlyOffice, and I'm sure a lot of people are not aware that this thing exists. As per the general experience of using Linux, most people seem to feel their system is very reliable. 56% said they have a few issues, but that they don't impact their trust in their OS. 38% said they didn't worry about stability at all, and only 6% in total said they had frequent issues that made them lose trust in Linux as their operating system. 71% of people who answered also said their experience with Linux was very good, better than other operating systems. Not extremely surprising when you know that most people who answered are watching a middle-aged man talk about Linux on YouTube, so probably they think Linux is cool. 6% said Linux was perfect, without issues. 16% said it was good and on par with other operating systems, and 6% in total said that their experience was bad or very bad, as in worse than other operating systems to downright unusable. For beginners, the very good percentage drops to 62%, the good percentage goes up to 23% compared to 16%, and the accumulated bad percentages go up to 13%, double the average of all answers in this form. Not really surprising to see beginners struggling a bit more here. If you cannot find answers to solve your problems, then obviously you're not going to have a good experience with Linux, or at least not as good as people who managed to solve their problems. Still, whether it's 6% or 13% of people who said their experience with Linux was just bad in general, that's a lot of people, especially since you consider that all of these people who answered this form are like people who enjoy Linux and watch Linux content online. Most people also felt they absolutely needed the command line to fix problems on their systems. 50% said they had to use it a bit, and 28% said it was mandatory to get a usable system. Only 23% said they didn't need to use the command line at all. And let's finish with how people found answers to their problems and how they interacted with the community. 61% said that they had to look online to find solutions, but that it was easy enough. 29% said finding solutions was difficult. 7% said they could not find solutions online at all, and only 3% said that they did not need online help altogether. So first, that is not as drastic as it sounds. Yes, there's about 97% of people who looked online for help, but that's normal. If you had never used a computer and started using Windows, you would probably also look online for help. Same goes for macOS. Computers are complex things and you do need help to get to grips with any operating system. But second, 1 person out of 3 said that it was not easy to find solutions to their problems online, which seems to indicate we have a lot of work to do to document things better. As per the Linux community, 35% of people did not interact with it. I'm assuming they found their solutions in articles and not forums. 29% of answers said most of their interactions were friendly. 23% said all their interactions were nice, and only 12% said that they had either mixed interactions with the Linux community or very negative interactions. Those are only 1% of answers. And well, this also contradicts my preconceived notions, but for once in the right way. I really thought the Linux community would be felt as way more toxic than it is in this survey. So it kind of proves that it must be a few bad apples spoiling the bunch, because in general, for beginners, you only have 18% of them who had a mixed interaction or a really bad interaction, but the bad interaction is so small, it's 1%. It's still too high, but it's not as bad as I thought. So there are a bunch of cool insights here. Personally, I was not expecting GPUs, office suites, application bugs, installing applications, or crashes on the desktop to be problems people would mention as specific big Linux issues. I was expecting the Linux community to be viewed as way more toxic than it is. I was surprised by a bunch of stuff. I was expecting installing Linux to be a major pain point, but it really isn't, not even for beginners. So hey, if you learned something here, or if everything went according to plan and you already knew all of this, it was exactly as you imagined things, let me know down in the comments, and in the meantime, I'll let you know what our sponsor can do for you. Tuxedo Computers makes computers that run with Linux out of the box. If you have hardware issues on Linux, or even sometimes software issues related to how your hardware doesn't work, then probably buying a computer that comes with Linux and has been built for Linux support is a better idea than buying something that only supports Windows and trying to retrofit Linux on top of it. Tuxedo computers are based in Germany, but they ship to most countries in the world. They have a big range of devices that will fit every price point and every need. All the devices have plenty of options for the components, for your logo, for the keyboard layout, and you can open, repair and upgrade all of their laptops. I only use their computers these days to run the channel and to game, so if you need a new device and you want to support a company that actively supports Linux by developing drivers and trying to upstream them, click on the link in the description below and get yourself a device from Tuxedo. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Plenty of the usual YouTube pleasantries down there. And if you really enjoy the channel, there are links in the description to help you support it financially and to gain some cool advantages and perks. So, thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!